The peen once padded along the drafty corridors to the patrician's bedroom. It had never been a sumptuous apartment at best, and contained little more than a narrow bed and a few battered cupboards. It looked even worse now, with one wall gone. Sleepwalk at night now, and you could step right into the vast cavern that was the great hall. Even so, he shut the door behind him for a semblance of privacy. Then, cautiously and with many nervous glances at the great space beyond, he knelt down in the center of the floor and pried up a board. A long black robe was dragged into view. Then once reached further down into the dusty space between the floors and rummaged around. He rummaged still further. Then he lay down and stuck both arms into the gap and flailed desperately. A book sailed across the room and hit him in the back of the head.
"Looking for this, were you?"
said Vimes. He stepped out of the shadows. Once was on his knees, his mouth opening and shutting.
"What's he going to say?"
Vimes thought.
"Is it going to be, 'I know what this looks like'? Or will it be, 'How did you get in here'? Or maybe it will be, 'Listen, I can explain everything. I wish I had a loaded dragon in my hands right now.'"
Once said, "Okay, clever of you to guess." Of course, that was always an outside chance, Vimes added.
"Under the floorboards," he said aloud. "First place anyone'd look. Rather foolish, that was."
"I know. I suppose he didn't think anyone would be searching," said Once, standing up and brushing the dust off himself.
"I'm sorry,"
said Vimes pleasantly. "Vetinari, you know how he was for scheming and things. He was involved in most of the plots against himself. That was how he ran things. He enjoyed it. Obviously, he called it up and couldn't control it. Something even more cunning than he was."
"So what were you doing?"
said Vimes. "I wondered if it might be possible to reverse the spell, or maybe call up another dragon. They'd fight then."
"A sort of balance of terror, you mean?"
said Vimes. "Could be worth a try," said Once earnestly. He took a few steps closer. "Look, about your job. I know we were both a bit overwrought at the time, so of course, if you want it back, there'll be no problem."
"It must have been terrible," said Vimes. "Imagine what must have gone through his mind. He called it up, then found it wasn't just some sort of tool, but a real thing with a mind of its own. A mind just like his, but with all the brakes off. You know, I wouldn't mind betting that at the start, he really thought that what he was doing was all for the best. He must have been insane. Sooner or later, anyway."
"Yes," said Once hoarsely. "It must have been terrible."
"Ye gods, but I'd like to get my hands on him. All those years I've known the man, and I'd never realized."
Once said nothing.
"Run,"
said Vimes softly. "What?"
"Run. I want to see you run."
"I don't understand."
"I saw someone run away the night the dragon flamed that house. I remember thinking at the time that he moved in a funny way, sort of bounding along. And then the other day I saw you running away from the dragon. Could almost have been the same man, I thought. Skipping, almost, like someone running to keep up. Any of them get out once?"
Once waved a hand in what he might have thought was a nonchalant way. "That's just ridiculous. That's not proof," he said.
"I noticed you sleep in here now," said Vimes. "I suppose the king likes to have you handy, does he?"
You've got no proof at all, whispered Once.
Of course I haven't. The way someone runs, their eager tone of voice, that's all. But that doesn't matter, does it? Because it wouldn't matter even if I did have proof, said Vimes. There's no one to take it to, and you can't give me my job back.
I can, said Once. I can, and you needn't just be captain.
You can't give me my job back, repeated Vimes. It was never yours to take away. I was never an officer of the city, or an officer of the king, or an officer of the patrician. I was an officer of the law. It might have been corrupted and bent, but it was law of a sort. There isn't any law now except you'll get burned alive if you don't watch out. Where's the place in there for me?
Once darted forward and grabbed him by the arm. But you can help me, he said. There may be a way to destroy the dragon. You'd see, or at least we can help people, channel things to mitigate the worst of it, somehow find a meeting point. Vimes' blow caught Once on the cheek and spun him around.
The dragon's here, he snapped. You can't channel it or persuade it or negotiate with it. There's no truce with dragons. You brought it here and we're stuck with it. You bastard.
Once lowered his hand from the bright white mark where the punch had connected. What are you going to do? He said. Vimes didn't know. He thought of a dozen ways that the thing could go, but the only one that was really suitable was killing Once. And face it, he couldn't do it. That's the trouble with people like you, said Once, getting up. You're always against anything attempted for the betterment of mankind, but you never have any proper plans of your own. Guards! Guards! He grinned maniacally at Vimes. Didn't expect that, did you? He said. We've still got guards here, you know. Not so many, of course. Not many people want to come in. There were footsteps in the passage outside, and 4 of the palace guards padded in, swords drawn. I wouldn't put up a fight if I were you, Once went on. They're desperate and uneasy men, but very highly paid. Vimes said nothing. Once was a gloater. You always stood a chance with gloaters. The old patrician had never been a gloater. You could say that for him. If he wanted you dead, you never even heard about it. The thing to do with gloaters was to play the game according to the rules.
You'll never get away with it, he said.
You're right. You're absolutely right. But never is a long time, said Once. None of us get away with anything for that long.
You shall have some time to reflect on this,
he said, and nodded to the guards. Throw him in the special dungeon, and then go about that other little task. Said the leader of the guards, and hesitated. What's the matter, man?
You, want us to attack him?
Said the guard miserably. Thick though the palace guard were, they were as aware as everyone else of the conversations. And when guards are summoned to deal with one man in overheated circumstances, it's not a good time for them. The bugger's bound to be heroic, he was thinking. The guard was not looking forward to a future in which he was dead. Of course, you idiot!
But, there's only one of him,
said the guard captain. And he's smiling, said a man behind him.
Probably gonna swing on the chandeliers any minute,
said one of the colleagues.
And kick over the table and that.
He's not even armed, shrieked Once.
Worst kind, that,
said one of the guards with deep stoicism.
They leap up, see, and grab one of the ornamental swords behind the shield over the fireplace.
Yeah, said another suspiciously. And then they chucks a chair at you. There's no fireplace, there's no sword, there's only him. Now take him, screamed Once. A couple of guards grabbed Vimes tentatively by the shoulders.
You're not going to do anything heroic, are you?
Whispered one of them.
Wouldn't know where to start,
he said.
Oh, right.
As Vimes was hauled away, he heard Once breaking into insane laughter. They always did, your gloaters. But he was correct about one thing. Vimes didn't have a plan. He hadn't thought much about what was going to happen next. He'd been a fool, he told himself, to think that you just had a confrontation and that was the end of it. He also wondered what the other task was. The palace guard said nothing, but stared straight ahead and marched him down, across the ruined hall and through the wreckage of another corridor to an ominous door. They opened it, threw him in, and marched away. And no one, absolutely no one, noticed the thin, leaf-like thing that floated gently down from the shadows of the roof, tumbling over and over in the air like a sycamore seed before landing in the tangled gewgaws of the horde. It was a peanut shell.